Homework 36 starts off with finding the angle between the two vectors. So we're going to have a formula for this, and it's going to tell us that the cosine of theta is equal to the dot product of A and B. We just did the dot product on the other page, over the magnitude of A times the magnitude of B. And again, we've done that on the previous page. So that's our formula that we're going to use. If you really want to know how they came up with that, you can read the Alex explanation that explains how they came up with the formula, but that's what we're going to do. So we're going to say that the cosine of theta is equal to the dot product. So the dot product meant we took the negative 6 times the 9 plus the 1 times the 4 over the magnitude of each of those. So for the magnitude, we did the square root of a squared plus b squared. So I would have negative 6 squared plus 1 squared times the square root of 9 squared plus 4 squared. So, simplifying that mess. This would be negative 54 plus 4. So I would have negative 50 on the top. On the bottom, this is going to give me 36 plus 1, which is 37. This is going to give me 81 plus 16, which is 97. So I have to multiply square root of 37 times the square root of 97. Don't know that in my head, so I got to find my calculator, which I put over here. So if I multiply 37 times 97, I get 3,589. Now the cosine of theta is equal to this. In order to find our angle, which we're doing to the nearest degree, so make sure your calculator is in degree mode, we are going to do the inverse cosine of negative 50 over the square root of 3,589. I'm going to use the parentheses again since I have a fraction. I always like to put the parentheses around there. So, shift cosine, inverse cosine of, in parentheses, negative 50 divided by, or fraction, square root of 3,589. Close my parentheses, hit equals. I get 146.575. I'm rounding to the nearest degree, so I would have to round that off to 147 degrees. So the angle between this vector and this vector would be 147 degrees. If I kind of just sketch that out, negative 6, 1 would be the vector going like this. 9, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 1, 2, 3, 4 would be the vector going like that. This angle in here is 147 degrees. That looks like it makes sense. So number 2, it wants us to find the angle between the negative 9, negative 7, and negative 4, positive 3 vector. So again, we're saying that the cosine of theta is equal to the dot product of my two vectors. So negative 9 times negative 4 plus negative 7 times positive 3 over the magnitude of each of my vectors. So we're going to have negative 9 squared plus negative 7 squared, and then negative 4 squared plus 3 squared. So simplifying that mess, negative 9 times negative 4 would be 36. Negative 7 times 3 is minus 21. So 36 minus 21 is going to give me 15 on the top of my fraction. On the bottom, negative 9 squared would be 81. Negative 7 squared would be 49. If I add those together, I get 130. Over here, negative 4 squared is 16. plus 3 squared is 9. 16 plus 9 is 25. So I have the square root of 130 times the square root of 25. I'm just going to multiply those two things together and not worry about simplifying. 130 times 25 gives me 3,250. So again, if I'm going to figure out what my angle is, I'm going to do the inverse cosine of my fraction there. 15 over the square root of 3,250. Making sure I'm in degree mode because I'm going to the nearest degree. So shift cosine to do inverse cosine, parentheses 15 divided by the square root of 3,250. Close my parentheses. I get 74.744. I'm rounding to the nearest degree, so that would round off to 75 degrees. Again, if I think about that, my one vector is going -9 and -7. So it's going down this way. My other vector is at -4. 1, 2, 3, 4, positive 3. 1, 2, 3. So it's going up this way. The angle between those two things ends up being 75 degrees. Looks like it makes sense. Number 3, same kind of thing. The cosine of theta is equal to the dot product of my vectors. So 8 times -8 plus 5 times 7 over the magnitude of my vectors multiplied by each other. So 8 squared plus 5 squared and -8 squared plus 7 squared. So 8 times -8 would be -64. 5 times 7, going to give me 35. So -64 plus 35 gives me -29 on the top of my fraction. On the bottom, 8 squared is 64, 5 squared is 25, so that is going to give me 89, square root of 89. 8 squared is 64, 7 squared is 49, 13, 7 plus 4, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 113. If I added those right, I'm just going to quickly double check. 64 plus 49. 113, yep. So now I'm going to multiply my square roots together. 89 times 113 gives me 10,057. So again, if I'm going to calculate my angle, I'm going to do the inverse cosine of -29 over the square root of 10,057. So shift cosine, parentheses, -29 divided by square root of 10,057. Close my parentheses. I get 106.808. I'm rounding that off to the nearest degree, so 107 degrees would be my answer. And again, if you wanted to sketch it out, you could look to see that. Hopefully that makes sense. So, again here, when it wants you to compute the angle between your two vectors, you're saying that the cosine of theta is equal to the dot product of your two vectors, and then on the bottom, the magnitude of each of your vectors times each other.